We've got hundreds of beavers with long legs and a violent nature. My spy's taking us to the Eternal City, and we're flying to the moon for some twisters. I'm Ben Connor.
And I'm Adam Ball, and this is Off Screen, your 7-day guide to everything movies.
Boom.
Groovy.
Hello and welcome back to Off Screen for another week of fun frolics, looking at all of the movies that Van's managed to catch this week. I think let's dive straight into the first one then. So we've got ourselves a crime horror thriller as it's described, and of course it's Nicolas Cage's new one, Longlegs.
But this seems to have been largely kept out of the marketing. Like, dependent on what marketing you see, they seem to pick and choose when to mention that Nicolas Cage is in this. So you'll have seen this because of its largely black and red marketing campaign. It's being touted as one of the scariest movies to be released in years and years. It's also being touted as the new Silence of the Lambs. Now, I'll call BS on both counts, if I'm honest, in a minute. But I'll take a run-up first, shall I? So, this is written and directed, Longlegs, it's called. Is written and directed by Oz Perkins, who himself is somewhat of a bit of horror royalty in a sense. Do you remember a few weeks ago we had that Russell Crowe exorcism movie, and it was directed by the son of the actor who had played the priest in The Exorcist? Similar thing here. Oz Perkins, the writer-director of this movie, is the son of Anthony Perkins, a.k.a. Psycho. Norman Bates in Psycho.
Oh, I see. So horror connections there.
Yeah, like the kid is horror royalty. Has written and directed this, set in the early 90s, and it's very much styled to look and feel like it's in the early 90s, which is a polite way of saying it's a shameless Silence of the Lambs rip-off. Like, really shameless. No bones about it. They're not playing subtle about it. We are ripping off Silence of the Lambs. So you have a young FBI agent who is called into this case of, a new Buffalo Bill-style psychopath. The twist here is that she has latent psychic abilities, and this is known within the behavioral science unit as they bring her onto this case, this rookie agent, to try and catch this maniac, known simply as Longlegs. Have a listen.
I saw a beast rise up out of the sea with 7 heads and 10 horns. And on his horns he wore 10 crowns. And on each head was written a blasphemous name.
What aren't you telling me?
He'll kill and kill again.
I know you're not afraid of a little bit of dark. Because you are the dark.
See, now, on paper, I should absolutely love this because Silence of the Lambs is in probably my top 5 favourite movies.
I'll go top 30 maybe for me. Top 20 in a pinch. Top 20. I'll go top 20. Silence of the Lambs. For me, it was my ex-girlfriend's favourite movie in the world. To be fair, and as far as I know, still is. I had to sleep below the poster of Hannibal Lecter for years. I chose the Serenity poster, and she chose the Silence of the Lambs poster. So Hannibal Lecter literally hung over us as we slept. So obviously, I'm fair game for this. I've seen the Silence of the Lambs like yourself. I am a fan, and you tell me that Nicolas Cage could be the bad guy in like a Silence of the Lambs knockoff. I'm like, oh, I'm down. Ooh, yes, like please. If it's good Cage, I'm down. It's not good Cage. This is not. I'm afraid it isn't. This is him going maniac, weird. This is weird Cage, and it's too much for a film that seems to come in 2 halves. So the first half is that Clarice Starling procedural Silence of the Lambs style affair, which is terrific, which is really good. And I'm watching it, and I'm going along with it. I'm like, yeah, my mate Will and I went to the premiere for this at the Prince Charles, and we were having a ball with that first half. It was great. Micah Monroe remains one of the genuine scream queens of our age. She has really good taste, I think, in the indie horror projects that she picks, which, according to herself in interviews, she does because those are the most interesting films to her as an actress. I can see that because she very clearly is quite invested in this kind of material, and she's great in them. And her half of the movie does reflect that. The second half, in which you've got a lot of Nicolas Cage, is daft and deranged and silly and all over the place and messy, and it doesn't quite come together. The story starts going off in very odd directions as well, and I feel it undermines what otherwise has been quite a well put together effort by Osgood Perkins. And that's a crying shame for me because I'm really down for this kind of thing. Give me an early 90s set, behavioural science psycho thriller, and I'm fair game. But this did not get me there.
That's a shame, because I would love to get stuck into another movie that's similar to and as good as Silence of the Lambs. But I guess we can make our own mind up because it's already in cinemas, so go and see it whenever you fancy.
Can I recommend? I'm halfway through rewatching a film at the moment that I used to love in the 90s that starred Dennis Quaid, and it's called Switchback. And I think you'd enjoy that. That is a good old school 90s thriller, but it was completely ignored by pop culture at large. And yet it's oddly good. It's got Arlie Ermy in a lead role. That's how good a movie it is.
I'm always up for discovering new 90s movies, especially. So, yeah, cool. I would definitely dive into that one as well. Longlegs, it's in the cinemas now. Go and see it if you fancy. Right, let's move on to In a Violent Nature. So, another horror thriller. I don't know anything about this one.
Right. This was a buzzy movie out of a horror festival scene a few months ago. I actually wound up seeing this at a screening a few months ago. I loved it. But because they showed it straight after Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey 2, that kind of owns your memory for the day, Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey. So I was insistent I had to see it again. And I'm very, very glad I did. I'm a very big fan of this film. So this is a new Canadian-made horror film from writer-director Craig Nash. This is effectively a Jason Voorhees-style spree killer. Like an in-the-woods group of teenagers, masked killer with a machete, and I think it's a machete in this case, hunting them down one by one, except the gimmick here is it's entirely from the narrative POV, point of view of the psycho. Okay, so we are entirely over the shoulder.
Interesting.
Like you're playing a Lara Croft game on PlayStation and your camera's over the shoulder kind of thing. It's like that with a mass murderer going after a bunch of sexy teens in the woods. No clip, because most of this has no dialogue. It's a line here and a line there. It probably has about 30 lines of actual dialogue in it. But wow! This is something to behold, and I highly recommend this one for you, Mr. Ball. I think this would be an interesting experiment to actually put you through. I'd be very intrigued.
I'm watching the trailer as I normally do while we're chatting on mute, and I get what you mean. Like, the camera is behind the protagonist all the time, and I love it. Like, it's a completely new way of looking at watching a movie, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely is. And there's been some interesting use of filming angles and point of view kind of perspectives in the past few months. And I'm thinking about things like Monkey Man, for instance, Bad Boys, Ride or Die, did the interesting one where they put the camera on the end of the handgun and faced it backwards on the actors. There's been some interesting filming techniques employed in recent months, and this is definitely one of the more unique ones, because I don't know if they actually used a cameraman or if it's actually a rig that they have strapped to the actor that just holds the camera in that sort of over-the-shoulder view. I would buy either, to be fair. But the fun of this is in the purity of its very grisly 1970s inspirations and that tone that it's going for. The performances in it are very good for this kind of film, but they don't really have to be. They're not dramatic performances in the way that that way that Horror Victim never has to be, in a sense. But I thought this was certainly something of a one of a kind. This is something you'll be thinking about for a while. You'll remember this. You'll put it on your horror shelf alongside, for instance, Maniac, which of course had a very good remake, I think in about 2012, 2013. I thought this was something to behold. I really enjoyed it. Like I say, I saw it twice. I loved it even more the second time, if I'm honest, but just a grisly, very fun ride. If you're into a good slasher film, unmissable stuff. If you're just looking for the hashtag cinema of it all, again, definitely something to check out because unmissable in that regard too.
If you're seeing it from behind the protagonist, as we specified there, do you get to know?
Isn't it? That's kind of the thing. He's narratively protagonist. But but that's the thing, isn't it?
Well, this is it though. Do you get to know like motive and all of that behind it, or are you still seeing that side from the people who he's attacking?
You do get bits here and there where they have to break, but the gimmick is largely the bulk of the film. They have to, in order to give you the backstory, for obviously, as you point out, they have to break with that. And I think it's a handful of times, at most half a dozen, but they are very short, punctuated scenes.
I love it. This is absolutely something I want to discover and watch. But if you want to do the same, In a Violent Nature is out in cinemas already. You can go and see it. And I feel like a cinema screen is probably the best way to see a movie like this on a proper big screen. So I might even look into that this weekend. We are going to move on to Hundreds of Beavers. Didn't think I'd be saying that today. In just a moment. And My Spy, the Eternal City. We'll see what Van thought to Hundreds of Beavers in a minute. Hello and welcome back to Off Screen. Let's dive straight into our next movie then. We are looking at Hundreds of Beavers. I don't really know what else to say to that, Van, other than can you please get me out of this hole and carry on?
Yeah, okay. So Hundreds of Beavers is a new... I think I would describe it as a period piece comedy. A period piece slapstick comedy, I would say. That comes to us from director Mike Cheslick, who has co-written the movie with its star... Now, I'm sorry, I have to look this up, because it's not a double-barreled name, it's a four-barreled name. Ryland Brixton Cole Twos.
Wow.
Is his name. He has co-written and stars in it. It is set in the 19th century, and the movie has been specifically made to look like a ye olde silent movie. So the old grain and film flicker, black and white, you can see the film reel at all times, things like that, like it's a 4:3 ratio, things like that. He's about an Applejack salesman in the 19th century. I think he's in the Canadian peninsula, I'm not sure. Who is stranded in the woods, is trying to survive, and finds himself set upon by hundreds of beavers, which are represented on screen to us as men in beaver suits.
I'm seeing it now. It's crazy.
Are you literally witnessing the trailer? It's as bonkers as it looks. Right, there's no dialogue in it again, so following up In a Violent Nature with this was quite a good choice, actually, in hindsight. And yeah, it's got all the sensibilities of like a Tex Avery cartoon or a Looney Tunes cartoon, something like a Bugs Bunny or a Tom and Jerry, but dialogue. Mind you, those cartoons were dialogue free in some cases, particularly Tom and Jerry.
Yeah,
obviously. But yeah, that's the crack of it, and it's very well made. There's a lots of playful use of animation and puppets and things like that as they chart and tell you different parts of the story, like the backstory for the movie. It comes with a theme song and things like that. And it's really well made. Like they've made this, I think, relatively on the cheap, and it's absolutely the best possible version of the concept that I think you could do. You look at this and think, I dig this. This is effectively like a Looney Tunes cartoon, or The Revenant, if it was made by the Letterkenny guys. I don't know if you've ever seen Shoresy. It's this obscure Canadian hockey series that I'm kind of low-key obsessed with, but it's got a very unique, very distinctly kind of from a specific region of Canada, like, where there's a lot of French and a lot of indigenous people as well. So it's a very unique melting pot of a tone and sense of humor. And this feels like if those guys made, like I say, The Revenant by way of a Looney Tunes cartoon. I had I want to say a great time with it, because most of the time I was sat there chin on hand thinking what the hell is happening right now? What on earth am I doing with my life? Who made this and why? The answers to which I can answer on no count whatsoever. I got nothing for you. I will, however, say it was a unique time. I think it's one of the most inventive films I've seen in a long, long time, alongside In a Violent Nature. I think this is true cinema. This is, let's do something unique and add something to film. Let's do something that no one has ever done in film. And for that reason alone, I would revisit it. I would want to see this again. This is a movie you get drunk with your boys and then put on, in the background. You're never going to believe this movie. And you stick this on. Like Hardcore Henry would be another example, or something like that. Hardcore Henry was the violent shoot-em-up that was all first-person perspective. That was like watching someone play Doom. This goes into that camp as well. Like I say, just pure inventive #cinema.
Obviously, as I said, I've been watching the trailer. I can see what you mean by that kind of silent movie esque style. But is there a piano in the background going?
Oh yeah. You've got all the music, like the vintage, like silent era music is over the top of this. Absolutely, yeah. It's very much in that you could have, if you could time travel, you could release this movie in cinemas in the 1930s and it would sell.
Amazing. Okay, well, if you want to watch it, Hundreds of Beavers is out in the cinema right now. Next movie, My Spy, The Eternal City. So this is a comedy, I think, isn't it?
Sequel.
I've not seen the first.
I think we reviewed it. We must have, because we were definitely working together at the time. The first movie was just, and I mean like a week before COVID lockdowns started. So I think it was like late February, early March 2020. It starred Dave Bautista as like a CIA agent who had to team up with a 9 or 10-year-old girl. He had to go like undercover in the apartment building that she lived in. And it was just like a spy action romp. And the whole gimmick was just that he was no good with kids and he had to learn to adjust to kids. By the end of the movie, they loved one another, kind of thing. And he became like the surrogate dad. Like, I think he started dating the mum and he became like a surrogate dad. We've now got, completely out of the blue, actually, because they only announced this in, I think it might have been February last year. Like, they pretty much announced it the second it was starting to be filmed. Might even be February this year, actually. I think it was February this year. Quite turnaround. And the idea here is, it is now 4 or 5 years after the events of that movie. JJ, who is Dave Bautista's character, has now become like a desk agent. He's an intel guy. He's the guy in the chair, who's telling the agent in the field over the radio, like, get out of there, the bad guys are down the corridor, grab the files, kind of. He's that guy. And he's living a very domesticated life because he has become even more of a surrogate father to Chloe Coleman, is her name, who is now, in the budding throes of her teen years, has, other interests, has new interests in her life, like namely boys, but also has this dream of building on everything that she experienced in the first movie and becoming an agent herself. She, however, like I say, also loves that boy, and she follows him along on a school choir trip to Rome to perform when the school sort of wins a performance-based contest for the choir. And Dave Bautista goes along to chaperone. No sooner have they arrived, however, than they find themselves sucked into an entirely new mission that they just happen to be nearby to, that involves them pursuing a new terrorist across Europe in pursuit of a bunch of former Russian suitcase nukes and a USB drive with all the codes used to arm them. In other words, saving the world from nuclear Armageddon. I've got a clip for you. This is from the very beginning of the movie when they're doing some pre-mission training.
Another set. It's the only time we get to hang out.
No, I can't, okay? I've got too much homework.
If you want to be a great agent, you got to put in the time.
Yeah, well, I have other interests now that also require my time.
I used to really want to be an agent. It's all you ever talked about.
Yeah, well, I also wanted to be Dora the Explorer. I've changed, okay? And so have you. I mean, being in the field is all you used to talk about, and now you prefer making pasta and scones.
Well, I think it's just another excuse to skip practice and take the easy road. When you're not hitting your high kicks, your punching speed is slow, and I haven't seen you pick up a knife in like 3 weeks.
So I noticed this is directed by someone called Peter Segal. Any relation to Steven Seagal?
No, thankfully not. No. Steven Seagal has never started a movie this well directed, and that is an actual fact. So it is actually, I believe it is a return for Peter Segal. I think Segal, who directed the first movie as well, has directed some absolutely banging comedies over the years. I mean, namely one of my very favourite comedies, Tommy Boy, with Chris Farley, which is, shout out to my best friend Andy Sharp, because we love that movie. I have the Funko Pops for David Spade and Chris Farley from that movie on my living room wall. I adore that movie. Peace! I love it. Now, to be fair, that first movie kind of got lost in the COVID shuffle. It was rushed out onto streaming. I think it went out via Prime. This is going out via Prime with no cinema release. And when I was watching this, I watched it this morning, actually. As I was watching this, I found myself thinking, God, that first one actually was a lot better. It is a lot better, and I just, than people think it is. And I did love it, and I'd kind of forgotten. Like, I had forgotten how much fun the first one was. And I really got into this. Like, it's not a revelatory movie or anything. It's basically Spy Kids mentality. But think Vin Diesel in The Pacifier. You ever see that one? Vin Diesel in The Pacifier, where he has to babysit the kids and there's like a spy mission at the same time?
Yes, I get it, yeah.
Very much in that vein, but it's also following the typical comedy sequel route of now we have to do the one where we go on like school vacation. You know, like Spider-Man Far From Home or something like that. You know, we have to do that formula. And they have fun with the location. The returning cast are all great. Ken Jeong is in there, obviously. Kristen Schaal from 30 Rock. I adore Kristen Schaal. I'm such a big Kristen Schaal fan. You've also got a few newcomers in there. Flula Borg is in there from Suicide Squad and a bunch of Zack Snyder movies, and kind of steals this in a sense. But of course, big MVP for me, which I won't go into too much for plot reasons, is Anna Faris. Who, as soon as you get Anna Faris in the movie, congratulations, you've got my money, sir, and I will also take money from you if it's Chris Pratt instead. I'm just saying, I have brand loyalty. I really enjoyed it. I did. I thought this was a good time, and I think if you're my age, right? Okay, or if you're our age, right? And you've got a daughter who's about 12 to 16, and you want a movie to watch together, it's kind of brilliant. It's kind of the perfect movie for the pair of you, because dad gets a Dave Bautista action movie, and daughter gets quite a cute and fun teen kind of coming-of-age comedy that also segs into a Dave Bautista action movie. And the pair are very fun together. They were in the first one. Chloe Coleman actually has sort of grown into something of quite an interesting young starlet. I could see her going kind of the Joey King route. I also enjoyed her in the Dungeons & Dragons movie last year as well. I think she was Chris Pine. Sorry, the good Chris. One of the good Chris's. Sorry. Chris Pine's daughter in Dungeons & Dragons. But yeah, this is a win, and I think a really fun movie to enjoy on streaming this week.
Well, there you go. You don't even need to leave the house this weekend if you fancy watching that. My Spy, The Eternal City on Amazon Prime from now. Right then, we've got Twisters to look at next, and also Fly Me to the Moon. We'll see what Van thought next. Stay there. Hello and welcome back to Offscreen then. We are diving straight into our next movie, which I hope was brilliant because I really want to see it. It's called Twisters. It's out in cinemas already. Van, I know you don't like burying the lead, but please tell me this was a good movie because it looks awesome.
I will tell you that I agree it looks awesome, and it is in fact a movie. However, I shall reserve judgment momentarily. I like to keep some suspense. So, it has been now 28 years since Twister. 1996, it was the second film of Jan de Bont, who was the cinematographer on a bunch of great movies like, I think, Lost Boys, Flatliners, things like that. Then made his directorial debut with Speed, made Twister in 1996, based on the novel by Michael Crichton, who at that point was riding high for Jurassic Park and, to a lesser extent, Congo as well. He was also known for being involved in ER. I think he was one of the creators of ER, and The Andromeda Strain from the 80s and Westworld. So Twister came, from relatively interesting pedigree. It featured Bill Paxton and Helen Hunt as the divorcing couple who were storm chasers who basically reunited in the process of launching an experimental series of probes into tornadoes in the American Midwest. We've now, 28 years later, got the sequel. And the sequel follows much the same concept. This one is directed by Lee Isaac Chung. It has, amongst its three writers, is Joe Kosinski, who gave us Top Gun Maverick. In place of Bill Paxton, we have Glenn Powell. In place of Helen Hunt, we have Daisy Edgar-Jones. And so the format this time around is Daisy Edgar-Jones is a young scientist who has lost her team to an unexpected incident where they have found themselves smack in the path of an F5 tornado, an F5 Twister, and it's wiped out all but one of her team, and she is living with the survivor's guilt of that. Jump forward a few years, and her fellow survivor Harvey, who's played by Anthony Ramos from the West Side Story remake about 2 years ago, the Spielberg West Side Story. which is how I assume he got recommended. I feel like he was a Spielberg recommendation. So, again, comes with pedigree. Harvey calls Daisy Edgar-Jones back into the field for 1 week. He gets her to agree to 1 week in order to help him pick up their former experiment and see it through to its conclusion. Their experiment involved firing an experimental chemical into a twister alongside a bunch of Bill Paxton and Helen Hunt's drones, their sensors from the first movie, to see if they can collapse a tornado. At the same time, they want to line it with a new series of scanners that will allow them to fully three-dimensionally map the twister. And the only thing standing in their way is that they have to get within 300 meters of said twister in order to put down each one of these three sensors. So they have to do this simultaneously from three different directions. Into this mix as well comes Glenn Powell, a showboating a-hole YouTuber who sort of branded himself the Tornado Wrangler. She's all science, he's all gristle and guts. There's a bit of sexual chemistry. Ooh, I tell you what, have a listen, see if you can guess how this is going to go.
What do you see?
It already has a nice structure. Moisture levels are just right and lots of cape.
What else are you seeing?
Flow is clean, pulling tons of warm, moist air from the south.
And when that warm air and moisture busts through the cap, it explodes in the atmosphere, creating an anvil. The vertical wind shear begins to rotate the updraft, forming a mesocyclone.
And here's the mystery.
We don't know how a tornado forms. We see the hook on the radar, but
What are all the invisible factors coming together? Every little detail that
has to be perfect. And it's a mix of what we know and everything we can't understand. It's part science, part religion.
Do you know, I feel slightly disappointed in this, and I'll say this because I feel that movies obviously are usually quite aspirational and can invent their own technology and just take the mind wherever they want you to go. Whereas in this, they seem to be using technology that already exists rather than being really creative and coming up with some crazy idea on how to do what they want to do inside the twister, like drones and like it's just like it doesn't seem very special to me.
Well, I think actually it really works. It really does. No, I will take your skepticism on board a second. I will also follow up said skepticism by telling you, first of all, Twister is one of, we said Silence of the Lambs is in my top 20 of all time. Twister is also in my top 20 of all time. I think Twister is one of the best movies of the 1990s, hands down. I think it's Jan de Bont's second best film because speed exists. I think it's a seminal text in the field of visual effects. I think its contribution to the field of visual effects cannot be understated, and it can't be overstated. It can't be overstated. I think it is just profound. I think it's a movie the like of which we don't really make anymore. It was also my first date movie, by the way. The first date movie I ever had in my life was Twister in 1990.
Mine was Free Willy.
Free Willy. I'm not gonna make the pun. I'm not gonna make the joke. I'm not gonna make the joke.
No, I was 14.
I was going to say, if you were the same age I was, I'm guessing the answer to my joke is going to be hell no.
Exactly.
Good God. Right. Anyway, that taken on board, when I said they don't make movies like this anymore, they damn sure do now. This really rocks. I loved it. I mean, pun intended, it blew me away. It does not quite have the character stuff down that the first movie had, but movies don't. And I don't think you can quite recapture anything close to that magic of Bill Paxton and Helen Hunt, who were quite evenly matched in terms of screen charisma. Here, Daisy Edgar-Jones cannot stack up against Glenn Powell. She simply cannot. And that's understandable. It's Glenn Powell. The man has charisma oozing out of every pore. He's also got a film brain, which is kind of annoying because I kind of resent a man that handsome also being that good at cinema, which irritates me. I say I did really like this. It had the thrills. It had the chills. There are sequences in there that really do get inventive and get creative. As far as the technology side that you were saying goes, I think what they've done here is actually very cleverly explore the logistics of, okay, on the one hand, we have a team of bleeding-edge scientists who in the first movie, and this tells you about a change for the times, in the first movie, the bleeding-edge scientists are the bad guys. In the second movie, they're the good guys. In the first movie, the ragtag team, the more ramshackle do this by feeling kind of team, are the good guys. And here, they're the bad... Well, they're not really the bad guys. They're Glenn Powell's team. But you know what I mean? Like, it changes to being the other team. And that dichotomy is quite interesting when you consider what they've done here, because obviously the movie is called Twisters. You know, it's plural. That's obviously, there's a great pun there on the James Cameron, the famous story. Do you know the famous James Cameron story?
No.
The Hollywood legend has it that James Cameron walked into 20th Century Fox in 1984 to pitch Aliens, to pitch his take on what would become Aliens. He wrote Alien on the blackboard, and then wrote an S on the end, and then wrote it into a $sign, and then they just gave him the job. And right, so the idea here is, of course, James Cameron is the king of sequels. Terminator 2 very famously takes the idea of, what if we flip the dynamic? What if the good guy is now the bad guy, and the kind of guy was... What if we do that? And that's effectively what they've done with the team dynamic here, and the technological side of it that goes with it. They don't push the technology because they seem to realise that Twister is very specifically of its time. And they have to keep this, as such, of its time. Because this is not a movie that has to remain timeless. In fact, it's in its interest not to. You cannot add a timeless quality to this because it undermines the idea that you need to be following on from. It's not a movie that's filled with cameos or references or anything like that to the first movie. In fact, the first movie does not come up. Save for, I think, one little visual Easter egg I noticed, which is the barrel of probes that they've got is called Dorothy 5. And I remember that the probes in the first movie were Dorothy 1 and Dorothy 2. So obviously they have used 3 and 4 at some point. I think we do actually see 4 used. But there is that tie. But other than that, it's not really like that. It's worth noting as well, the big set piece in the first movie is literally how this movie opens. Like, it starts with kind of the money sequence from the first movie. There is nothing as iconic as the flying cows, before you ask. The flying cows remain untouched. You know, one of the things. It's everyone's favourite moment of Twister is the flying cows. But it's got the ride, and Lee Isaac Chung has really brought a sense of slickness to this, I think. I really went along with this. Like I say, Daisy Edgar Jones does not stack up against Glenn Powell, but... that kind of star versus star imbalance is something we're also going to talk about in the next movie anyway, so it's just that's an unmistakable fact of reality. However, I will say, first of all, if you can get to a 4DX screen, do. If you can get to an IMAX screen, do. On the 31st of this month, we are recording this on the 18th. We are 13 days away from my birthday. I have a tradition. I don't know if I've ever told you this. On my birthday, every single year, if it falls on a weekday, weekend, whatever, I take the day, unless I have to go in and review something, in which case I'll do it after. I take the day, I get a bottle of Jack Daniels, and I go and see whatever the big movie is out that time, you know? So it means that if I'm doing it with IMAX, for instance, this year it would presumably be Deadpool and Wolverine, right? However, this was so good and so much fun that I genuinely thought to myself, this year I'm going to make an exception. I'm going to go and see Twisters in 4DX. I want to feel the wind machines on me and the chairs rattling. And do you know what I discovered, Mr. Bull? Do you know what I damn well discovered?
Oh, don't tell me they don't do it.
They are going to stop showing Twisters in 4DX at 8:30 in Cineworld Milton Keynes the night before.
Oh, no. Oh, no.
The Buffy curse continues. The Buffy.
Are you going to go the night before?
No, it ruins the tradition, so it's going to have to be Deadpool. I don't break tradition. Last year I did Oppenheimer, but this year I'm going to do... I'm the only person that's going to be watching Deadpool and Wolverine begrudgingly. The only person.
Yeah, you will. You will. Although, there's probably a blessing in disguise, because imagine trying to drink a bottle of Jack Daniels with wind blowing in your face and the chair rocking. You know, look at it that way.
It would not be the first time. Anyway, Twisters is excellent. Go and see it.
It is out in cinemas already, so yeah, as Van said, try and find a 4D if you can, because it sounds like it's worth it. Right, one final movie to look at next, Fly Me to the Moon. We'll see what Van thought of that one in just a minute. Hello and welcome back to one last ride on Offscreen. We are looking at the comedy now, Fly Me to the Moon. I haven't seen a lot about this, but it does look quite funny.
It is quite funny, to be fair. I won't lie about that in advance. So, new movie. This is directed by Greg Berlanti, who is basically the godfather of the Arrowverse. You know the Arrowverse on TV? You had Arrow and The Flash and Legends of Tomorrow and Batwoman and Supergirl, those shows, and they all shared a universe and they teamed up. Superman and Lois is on BBC One at the moment. That's still part of it, I think. Greg Berlanti is the guy who ran that and has directed this as well. I think he's not actually had a hand in writing, but I think he's just directed this. Director for hire gig. It stars Scarlett Johansson and Channing Tatum alongside sort of a bevy of other talent as well, but they are the two poster stars. And it takes place around the space race, particularly the moon landing in 1969. The idea here is that the US government, represented on screen by Woody Harrelson, of all people, and to a lesser extent Ray Romano, go to a marketing whiz played by Scarlett Johansson, who's in full Mad Men mode. And she tries every trick imaginable. She'll do a pitch to a group of men with a pillow under her dress, giving them the illusion that she's pregnant. And as soon as she gets away, she just lights a cigarette, pulls the pillow out. You know, she's kind of a badass huckster type. And she's hired by Woody Harrelson's government rep to go to NASA and handle the branding for NASA surrounding the space race, making sure that the American public care about the space race. But at the same time, how can they brand it? How can they make money off it? How can they cut the costs using, the money that they make? Things like that. And she very quickly falls under the ire, we should say, of Channing Tatum, who is he Cole Travis? Cole Davis, I think he is. One of the NASA reps who's just trying to get his boys to the moon. And, of course, doesn't really like the idea of having this marketing, advertising type coming in and constantly meddling. Can you wear this T-shirt when you go to the moon? Can you make sure that when you go out for dinner you put this watch on? Things like that. However, they are sort of forced to team up when, as the moon landing gets closer, Woody Harrelson shows up and says, right, we need a backup plan for if this all goes spectacularly wrong. And they crash on the moon. So we need you to come up with a fake moon landing that we can simply cut to on the broadcast. We can just put some interference in and then cut to the fake moon landing. And at least in the eyes of the world, we still win. And to that end, yeah, the game is afoot. So I've got a clip for you. This is ScarJo introducing Channing Tatum to all of the product placement that she's bringing to NASA.
A watch ad? That's your big idea?
Ready? Mm-hmm. Toothpaste. Tang, the energy breakfast drink chosen for Apollo astronauts on their trip to the moon.
Moon coupons.
But my personal favorite? Fruit of the Loom, right? The guys got to wear something under those big suits, don't they?
NASA, like Fruit of the Loom. Look, I am not turning this ship into a flying billboard, no matter how much you want it to happen. And, by the way, we don't have time to test all this before liftoff.
We don't have to send any of this up into space as long as we say it went.
Oh, so you're gonna lie?
It's called selling. We're not lying to the customer. We're changing the way they think.
No, it's called lying.
Fruit of the Loom? They missed a trick then. It should have been Fruit of the Moon.
Well, you would have imagined that would have been the marketing campaign, don't you? I'm sure that was the ad. I'm sure it was Fruit of the Loom is Fruit of the Moon. I'm sure they would have done those billboards, as he says in the clip. And now, this is very much right up my alley, this kind of film. This is a kind of movie, again, like Twisters. We don't really make them like this anymore. There is a very mid-1990s charming Kevin Costner kind of rom-com element to it. That being said, Channing Tatum is not Kevin Costner. And when you put him opposite Scarlett Johansson, who is very much firing on all cylinders here, he simply can't stack up. So the same dynamic that you had in Twisters, where Daisy Edgar-Jones just simply cannot stand toe-to-toe on the charisma side with Glenn Powell, Channing Tatum simply cannot manage it with Scarlett Johansson. She owns this movie. From literally her first scene, she owns Fly Me to the Moon. It is very much her movie. It's a very expensive movie. I think Apple have forked out $100 million for this, and you don't necessarily feel that on screen. It doesn't feel like $100. It feels like a sort of what used to cost 15 or 20. But you know that's all clearly gone into the back end because they need to pay Tatum and ScarJo off lest they be sued for sticking a movie on streaming again. Particularly since it's ScarJo, and she's evidently particularly litigious. Before you ask, no, they do not use the Sinatra song. There is a crappy cover of it, but the Sinatra song does not appear in this. I'm sorry to break it to you, my friend.
I was going to say, I mean, I get that. It's probably wouldn't fit really, would it? But does it have a decent... Do you reckon? I don't know. I do think it needs a good soundtrack, though. I don't know if they've bothered with anything else.
There are some great classic 60s needle drops in there, all the requisite ones that you need to have. There's loads of the doo-wop and things like that. And like I say, the period piece setting of it is really lavishly photographed, really well staged. And like I say, I mean, the film has the charisma. And I'm not saying Tatum is without charisma. He gives pretty well. He gives pretty good charm here, but he's just not got the same appeal here that ScarJo has. Her performance is so much more fun and larger than what he's giving you, and it feels very much he's almost the straight man here to the double act. And you sort of think, like, in the 90s you could have gotten away with this if it was Costner, but the film still feels enough like that lovely lavish throwback piece that you go along with it anyway. Just a funny aside for you here, by the way, my friend Jared came along with me to the premiere for this, and Jared loves a conspiracy theory. He agreed. I said to him, he said, have you got any movies coming up I could come along to? I went, I've got Fly Me to the Moon in a couple of days. Do you want to come? And he says, well, what's it about? Is it about NASA? I went, actually, it's about faking the moon landing. It's like a comedy about faking the moon landing. And his immediate response was, I've got to see that. Hadn't seen a trailer or anything. Just came along completely off that description. And he loved it. And he came out and he kept saying, oh, you know what? That thing they did there, like, I could believe they did that, and I could believe that happened. And and you're like, oh, good Lord, shut up, man. And like, the movie's quite knowing about it as well. Like, when they start, like, talking about faking the moon landing, like having to hire a director and things like that, they're like, Kubrick, that hack? No. You're like, yeah, okay, that's kind of the gag I expect that you have to do in this. And it makes those guys, there's some quite clever sort of, just science jabs, a couple of NASA references, things like that. There are little background cameos for like iconic astronauts and things like, oh, look, there's a little young Gene Coon and people like that. Like, okay. I really enjoyed it. I did. My only sort of black mark against it is just that I don't think Tatum and ScarJo are in any way evenly matched at all. And I think that works to the film's detriment. But other than that, really charming and really fun. I liked it.
Well, if you want to check out Fly Me to the Moon, you can. It's in cinemas already. Okay, well, before we disappear, let's have a quick look at some of the movies we're going to be covering next week then, Van. About dry... Is that grasses?
Is about dry grasses, yes. So this is about a teacher in who's hoping to. He's stuck in a position that he's really unhappy with, hoping to move to Istanbul, and he's started to lose his faith in the world and sort of gets reignited. I'm told it's very good. It's a foreign language film, so they have to drop a foreign language film the week that there's a superhero movie out, because otherwise the Cardigans go nuts. Like, anyone owning a Cardigan will go nuts if there's a movie with a Marvel badge in cinemas and they can't watch something with subtitles instead. Look, God forbid.
Right, we've got I Saw the TV... I mean, I haven't heard of any of these apart from the next one. I Saw the TV Glow. What a weird title for a movie.
This is meant to be terrific. So this was sort of a really buzzy thing, again, sort of out of the horror festival scene. It's sort of a horror thriller drama hybrid that stars Justice Smith. And I've had the link for this for months. I just thought, I'm not going to watch it. I'll wait till the week it's out, like a good boy. And, because I like to watch them as close to release as possible. I mean, except for like dinner party bragging rights, there's really no advantage to be gained out of it. So I'm looking forward to seeing this. This is about, I believe this is a period piece, actually, but I hear really terrific things. And of course, you know full well what we're going to be talking mostly about next week. So I'll let you take this one away.
Well, it'll be a little movie called Deadpool and Wolverine that we'll be looking at next week, and that I can't wait to hear what you think of.
But I've seen the first half hour of it. So I have seen the first half an hour of it. They stopped, by the way. They stopped the movie at the bit that everybody loved in the trailer as well. Like, just before we got to see what came next, I'm like, oh, come on! And then they give you sort of a sizzle reel special-made trailer for the remaining 90 minutes. I can tell you that based on the first 30 minutes of Deadpool and Wolverine, this thing is going to make so much money and is going to be probably the most beloved movie of this summer. I would not be shocked if this is not the film that everyone comes away loving on the back of the summer. I really think this is going to be Spider-Man No Way Home, I think. I think for the Deadpool crowd, this is going to play like Spider-Man No Way Home. And I am really excited because just from what I've seen alone, and believe me, I could drop massive spoilers entirely based on 30 minutes of it. And I promise you, everything is great. Every single thing that was in that half an hour, I thought was just great. So bring it on, or hashtag LFG, as they say in the trailer. Bring it on.
Well, we will see what Van thinks of that when he's got to watch the other hour of it at the end of it next week, of course. That is all we've got time for this week on Off Screen, of course. We shall return next week. Until then, I've been Adam Ball.
I've been Van Connor, and we'll be back.